And the fact of the matter is, most drag performers are not grooming children. Most drag performers, when they are engaging in Drag Queen Story Hour, there's benefits to that. The benefits of Drag Queen Story Hour, kids love being read to. I remember being read to as a child. I remember sitting in the library, and I remember the librarian being a little boring and just, oh, kids, here's the story, here you go. When kids are imaginative, kids love imagination and fantasy and fun. And there is something that is very imaginative and fantasy filled about drag performance, whether or not you are a cis or trans drag performer. And so children love to be read to by drag performers because it's fun and it's imaginative and it's fantasy filled. And they're not even saying, okay, you have to be a drag performer, you have to be trans, you have to be LGBTQIA. And that's part of the argument that I disagree with, that LGBTQIA people, and specifically drag performers, are grooming children. We're not grooming them. We're trying to say that you are welcome to be you as you are. If you are cis, heterosexual, fabulous. If you end up being queer, fabulous. We're not trying to steer you any particular way. But I remember being a queer child, and I remember not having any sort of mentor or model to look at. And I felt very othered, and I felt very different. And it actually caused a lot of mental health problems. And so when you actually introduce children to the diversity of gender identity, to the diversity of sexuality, to the diversity of everything other than the cis heteronormative family, you show kids that it's okay to be you as you are. You don't have to follow this particular guideline that is, again, defined by the patriarchy. And you can be whoever you are, and you're welcome to be who you are. I'm not saying you must be trans, you must be a drag performer. But if you end up being that when you grow up, great. And I remember not having that sort of influence. And I remember the impact that it had on my mental health as a queer youth in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, not seeing anybody that was like me anywhere in society. And it made me fearful to be who I am.
Are you familiar with Desmond is Amazing?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts? I'll ask some questions, but I just want to let you open up.
Yeah, I don't know Desmond. I have seen Desmond online. I know that they are a queer youth who wanted to engage in drag, and I think that's perfectly okay. I don't think that Desmond's parents are behind the scenes saying, you have to be a drag performer. We're trying to groom you to be trans. There is actually no benefit to it because queer people and trans people are overwhelmingly ostracized in the society that we live in, that I don't think that a person who didn't want to engage in that would choose to engage in that knowing the kind of ostracism and criticism and hatred that would come to follow. The things that I've read about this child are disgusting. And that's so much more horrific than this person saying, I want to put on a skirt and a wig and perform.
You're familiar with go-go dancing, I assume?
Yeah.
And bikini bars?
Sure, yeah.
In many states, what they define as stripping is the removal of any clothing on stage with no nudity. The act of removing clothing is the stripping of clothing.
So, Tim, this is stripping?
If you were on stage for a bunch of adults...
I'm on stage for a bunch of adults right now.
Offering you money for the explicit purpose of seeing you remove clothing, this is where you have... context matters, right? Like, yeah. I think...
But I think I get where you're going at, Tim, but here's the thing. Drag performers, like there is the reveal of drag. I think that a lot of people just aren't familiar with drag culture. And there is this idea of performing where there's a reveal. And that doesn't mean stripping down and being sexual. Taking off a garment to show an undergarment does not mean that it is stripping or being sexual.
So in, I think South Dakota might be the state, but there's a bunch of states. Women aren't allowed to be fully nude on stage. So they have what they call bikini bars or go-go bars. The women will go on stage and do what is in every way identical to what Desmond does on stage here, removing an outer layer of clothing in exchange for money from the audience. Desmond is a child in this. I could be wrong. It's been several years. This is 2019. My understanding was that this was an adult bar full of adult males watching the child perform on stage and do things that many have argued were sexually suggestive, especially in the Gwen Stefani portion of this. And then in exchange for money. So for many people who live, and we can just say perhaps in a more conservative area, this is indistinguishable from stripping. So this is an 11-year-old doing the same things bikini dancers do for money.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's indistinguishable from stripping. You know, I, as a drag performer, I've been performing for 8 years now. And I will go out there and I might come out in something like this where I'm wearing a blazer and I perform and I take it off and people will cheer and give me money. Are they cheering and giving me money because I'm stripping and turning them on? No, it is entertainment and it's a performance and it's a part of queer arts. I don't think that this child, I don't think that they're trying to be sexual. I don't even think that the parents are trying to sexualize the person. I think that this is a kid who has seen drag culture, knows that they're queer, and wants to engage in it in a way that is age appropriate. Did that child get naked on stage? I don't think so.
Bikini dancers don't get naked either.
Yeah.
So that's the issue.
Yeah, but also there's a difference between standing up on a box and go-go dancing, you know, thrusting yourself out there for very obvious sexual intentions versus somebody who is just doing a drag performance. And I think that's something that really bothers me, is that people equate drag performances with strippers and with adult entertainment. Drag performances are actually all ages, but there are specific performances that are appropriate for, say, Drag Queen Story Hour versus a nightclub.
When it comes to this, I don't know if... See, I was kind of like this kid on the opposite direction. I got into Little League because I was groomed and felt pressure to make my parents happy.
Hello, I can agree with that.
So I went into Little League when I really wanted to. I was really a gay kid. In my day, we didn't use queer. Queer was a slur. I'm 53 years old, so I'm a little old, from a different generation. So queer was an offensive thing to call people. And as far as like influences, gay influences, I grew up. Now this is in the 80s. I grew up across the street from two moms. I think a lot of this tolerance that they're trying to thrust on the public starts at the home, and it's like these kids come from tolerant homes, and so
but what about the kids that don't come from tolerant homes?
Well, I don't think those are the kids that are being read to.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that's the thing. There are queer children being raised in homes that are intolerant. Mm-hmm. I myself grew up in a home where my parents became much more tolerant when they realized that I was a queer person. And there was a lot of hesitation and objection at first. And that was based off of what they had learned growing up. And so we're perpetuating this culture of gay is weird. LGBTQIA is, oh, that's other. You don't know. Don't engage in that. That's adult content. There's something wrong with that. I wish I had grown up in a school environment where I had adults and other people around me saying, it's okay to be who you are.
Mm-hmm. I think go ahead.
No, I guess... Because like I said, I grew up in an earlier time, and I did not have your experience at all. My experience came from other kids. I don't know can I say faggot on here? I was called a faggot every day of my life. I was called a faggot, and I was still myself. And I don't know, and I think that's what we need to be teaching kids is not for me to tolerate something that you do, but for you to be able to take my opinion and just say okay. And still be you.
But that's the reason that doesn't happen, is because queer kids are growing up in environments that are not necessarily queer. And when you ban any sort of LGBTQIA education from school levels until you get to high school, that's where you breed people who fear and who other folks who are LGBTQIA. The reason that you were called a faggot, the reason I was called a faggot, was because those other kids grew up in environments where they heard their parents calling other people faggots.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to let folks and let kids today in this generation know that it is okay to be queer. It's okay to be LGBTQIA. And again, there's nothing inherently sexual about being LGBTQIA, just in the same way that there's nothing inherently sexual about being cis heteronormative. And there is a connection there, of course, according to who you love and who eventually you have sex with. Right. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to teach kids about explicit sex.
I gotta completely disagree. We have these two books here, Genderqueer Less So, This Book Is Gay More So, explicitly teach about overt sexual acts, depicting them, and were provided to children, sometimes as young
Now,
as age of
Tim,
10.
let me ask you, when you say children, what do you mean by children? Because children
10-year-olds?
could be 0 to 18. What do you mean by children?
So this was 10-year-old. This is middle schoolers. This book is gay specifically was given to...
You don't think that middle schoolers who are starting to go through puberty and who are starting to have sexual intercourse and starting to experiment with sexuality, you don't think that any of them are queer and might need to learn about queer experience?
There's a difference between sex ed and This Book is Gay, which teaches those children how to use Grindr.